The sky over Norfolk Naval Station, Virginia, stretched wide and cloudless, the brilliant blue horizon interrupted only by the steady rhythm of ocean waves crashing against the docks. Along the expansive tarmac, a salty breeze mingled with the scent of steel and determination. Rows of sailors in crisp uniforms stood at attention, their faces a mix of discipline and quiet anticipation. Today, every eye was fixed on the unfolding events, for a meeting had been scheduled for weeks, a meeting that would soon ripple out to affect not just the base, but the entire country. In a motorcade that rolled through the base gates like a black velvet river, Donald Trump arrived in a convoy of sleek SUVs. The vehicles sliced through the morning calm as they came to a stop before the assembled crowd. As the press corps moved into position, cameras and microphones at the ready, the air was charged with expectation. When the door of the lead SUV swung open, Trump stepped out, exuding the unyielding confidence that had defined his public persona. Adjusting his suit jacket and flashing his trademark grin, he addressed the crowd. "Great to be here. You've got the best sailors in the world, no doubt about it." A polite round of applause followed. Some sailors standing stoic, hands clasped behind their backs, while others exchanged subtle, knowing glances. In that moment, any personal opinions or partisan divides were set aside. Today was about the military, their military, and the unspoken honor of the chain of command. Rear Admiral Jonathan Reese, a seasoned officer with decades of service, stepped forward and offered a firm handshake. "Welcome to Norfolk, Mr. President. We appreciate your time," he said, his tone respectful yet measured. Trump's reply was brisk. "Absolutely. These are the people who keep America strong. We owe them everything." Reese gestured toward a waiting platform. "We'll begin with a tour of the aircraft carrier and then move to the command center for a briefing. After that, you'll have the opportunity to speak with some of our officers." Trump's eyes glinted as he glanced at the towering carrier in the distance. "Sounds good, let's take a look." As they made their way along the dock, the press followed in a flurry of cameras and whispered commentary. It was a standard visit on paper, hands shaken, support shown, patriotic posturing on full display. Yet beneath the surface, an undercurrent of tension buzzed quietly. This was no ordinary tour, and today one conversation would spark debates for hours across the nation. Aboard the USS George H.W. Bush, the atmosphere was one of disciplined order. The group moved through the labyrinth of corridors and cramped officer quarters, where every sailor stood proud and every footstep echoed with the weight of responsibility. The familiar clamor of voices, the rhythmic clang of boots on metal, and the occasional murmur of technical updates filled the space. It was a scene that Trump had witnessed before. Disciplined, precise, and unwavering in its dedication to duty. After a detailed briefing in a glass-walled room overlooking the flight deck, the conversation shifted from standard operational reports to a more candid exchange behind closed doors. In a private meeting room, far from the prying eyes of the press, Trump settled into a leather chair with a casual air that belied the intensity of the conversation. Across from him, several high-ranking officers sat in a semicircle. Among them was a rising Navy captain, a woman whose name, though not widely known to the public, carried weight within the service. Her name was Captain Dawson, and she was just beginning to make waves with her tactical brilliance and unyielding resolve. Barely in her 40s, Dawson had already proven herself in a series of demanding assignments. Her uniform was immaculate, every medal and ribbon a testament to years of sacrifice and dedication. Yet today, she was not just a decorated officer, she was here to speak her truth in a conversation that would soon reverberate far beyond the confines of Norfolk. As the meeting progressed, Trump's questions took on an unexpected tone, one that blurred the boundaries between formal briefing and personal inquiry. Leaning back in his chair, Trump tapped a finger on the polished wood table. "So tell me," he said, his gaze sweeping over the assembled officers, Who's been making waves? Who's the real deal?" After a brief pause, a voice among them mentioned Captain Dawson's name. An officer confirmed, "She's right outside, sir." Trump's eyes narrowed in interest. "Bring her in," he ordered. The room filled with a renewed buzz as the doors opened and Captain Dawson stepped forward. Captain Dawson exuded confidence and calm. As she approached the table, every eye in the room was fixed on her. She carried herself with a quiet authority, the kind that came from years of leading through adversity. When she finally reached the center of the room, Trump offered a small, knowing smirk and said, "Well, well. They say you're the one to watch." Dawson's reply was measured. "I don't know about that, sir. I just do my job." Her voice was firm, yet unassuming. At that, the room fell into a heavy silence, the kind where every word would be scrutinized, dissected, and debated by both the military and the media that waited just outside the door. Trump leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with genuine interest. "How long have you been in?" he asked. 18 years, sir," Dawson replied without hesitation. "That's a long time," Trump remarked, folding his hands on the table as if weighing a great decision. "Tell me, what's the biggest challenge you faced as a leader?" The question was loaded, a challenge to her experience and resilience. Dawson took a steady breath, knowing that every word she spoke here could spark a national debate. "Earning trust," she began, her voice unwavering. "As a woman in command, you don't just get respect handed to you, you have to prove yourself over and over again. Every decision, every action is scrutinized twice as hard as those of your male counterparts. If you're tough, you're seen as too aggressive. If you're cautious, you're seen as weak. And that's before we even talk about the extra pressures we face when leading sailors trained to question authority when it doesn't come from the expected places." A murmur rippled through the room. Some officers shifted in their seats, and the press outside perked up, sensing a story that was about to break wide open. Trump's eyes remained fixed on Dawson, the silence punctuated only by the occasional clack of a keyboard from the nearby control center. Trump's tone grew reflective. "That's interesting. Do you think that's changing, or is the military still stuck in the past?" His question, though casual, cut deep, touching on the systemic challenges that many had long discussed but few dared to confront openly. Dawson considered the question carefully before answering. "It's changing slowly. Change in the military is not like flipping a switch. It takes time, effort, and leadership willing to push the envelope. But I believe we are moving in the right direction if we continue to lead by example." Trump leaned back and smirked, as if amused by her straightforwardness. "You don't pull punches, do you?" he observed. "I don't have time to," Dawson replied succinctly. A tension filled the room, a tension that was as much about the personal convictions of these leaders as it was about the broader cultural shifts within the military. Before anyone could comment further, a knock sounded from the hallway, and a voice interrupted. "Sir, the press is waiting." Trump rose slowly, his expression unreadable for a moment before he turned to Dawson. "I like you, Captain Dawson. You're sharp. You speak the truth, and that's something many could learn from." His words, though brief, carried a weight that resonated beyond the room. "I'm going to take you with me for a tour of the carrier. I want you to show me what leadership means in your world." The officers exchanged looks, some of approval, others of apprehension. As Dawson nodded in acceptance, she knew that every word spoken in that closed-door meeting would be scrutinized once it leaked out. And she could sense that her testimony was about to take on a life of its own. Later that day, as the group moved through the labyrinthine corridors of the aircraft carrier USS George H.W. Bush, the press trailed discreetly behind, capturing every handshake and every whispered conversation. The grandeur of the ship, a symbol of American might, was contrasted by the intimate, almost hushed tone of the briefing that followed. In a secured briefing room with no cameras allowed, Trump and his senior advisors listened as officers provided the latest operational updates. It was during a lull in the technical reports that Trump's mind returned to his conversation with Captain Dawson. The topic of leadership had clearly struck a nerve, and he found himself reflecting on the countless challenges he had faced in his own career. But more importantly, he wondered about the systemic barriers that still hindered progress, especially for those who did not fit the conventional mold. In a rare moment of candor, Trump leaned back and said, "I've always believed that leadership is about making tough decisions, about earning trust through action. But I also know that sometimes the system itself can be the biggest obstacle." His eyes, usually steely with resolve, softened slightly as he added, "Captain Dawson, your words earlier, they made me think about the struggles you face, about the extra burden you bear every day. Tell me, in all your years of service, what has been the hardest part of being a woman in command?" Dawson paused, gathering her thoughts. "Sir," she began, her tone even but filled with an undercurrent of emotion, "the hardest part isn't just the physical challenges of command, it's the constant battle for recognition. The need to prove yourself over and over, even when you know you've given everything. I've had to fight not only for the safety of my sailors, but for the right to be seen as equal, worthy of trust, worthy of respect. And sometimes that means facing criticism simply because I'm different." The room fell silent. Even the senior advisors, who had heard many such accounts, seemed to absorb the weight of her words. Trump's gaze was fixed on her, and for a long moment there was nothing but the soft hum of the ship's engines in the background. Finally, Trump spoke, his voice low and measured. "You've articulated something that many in this room might not have the courage to say aloud. It's a reminder that the military is evolving, but slowly and not without resistance. You challenge not only our methods, but our assumptions." His words, though simple, resonated powerfully. "I want the nation to hear this. I want your truth to be known." Even though the meeting was behind closed doors, the conversation would not remain secret for long. Within hours, a snippet of Captain Dawson's testimony had leaked to the press, and the entire country was suddenly debating her words. Headlines exploded. "A rising Navy captain speaks out, earning trust is the hardest battle," and "Is the military stuck in the past? Captain Dawson's candid testimony stokes national debate." As word spread of Captain Dawson's revelations, the country became polarized by her testimony. On one end of the spectrum, many hailed her as a brave truth-teller, a symbol of the resilience and determination required to overcome institutional bias. Across news channels and online forums, supporters argued that her words exposed a reality too long ignored, that women in leadership face an uphill battle, constantly scrutinized and held to impossibly high standards. Conservative pundits and military veterans echoed her sentiments. "We've always known that earning trust isn't easy," proclaimed one veteran on a televised panel. Captain Dawson's words resonate because they speak of a truth that has been ignored for too long. On the other side, critics were quick to seize upon her message as a sign that the military was too soft, a departure from the traditions of strength and discipline. Some argued that her testimony was an overreaction, that the challenges she described were exaggerated in today's world of advanced training and modern technology. "If you're in the military, you earn your stripes," one conservative commentator argued. "There's no room for complaint when you're given the tools to succeed." Captain Dawson's attitude only weakens the resolve of our armed forces. The debate spilled into every corner of public life. Newspapers featured op-eds dissecting her words. Talk radio hosts held heated discussions about whether the military needed to change its culture, or if her words were simply reflective of the personal struggles of one individual. Social media erupted with hashtags like Captain Dawson Speaks and Earn Your Trust, with thousands of users posting their own experiences and opinions about leadership and equality in the armed forces. For Captain Dawson herself, the explosion of public opinion was overwhelming. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with messages, some of praise, some of harsh criticism. Emails from colleagues, former commanders, and even friends who had once been silent began pouring in, urging her either to step back or to speak out further. In the midst of this storm, one message stood out. A personal note from a young enlisted sailor stationed overseas. It read, "Captain, your words have given me hope. I've been told to toughen up and never question the chain of command, but seeing your truth has shown me that I don't have to hide who I am. Thank you for being brave." Those words reinforced the impact of her testimony, and for many of those serving, they were a beacon of validation that their struggles were real and worth addressing. As the debate raged on, the Navy's Public Affairs Office stepped in. A senior officer, whose tone was both apologetic and pragmatic, summoned Captain Dawson to a private meeting. The room was stark, lit by a single fluorescent light that cast harsh shadows on the walls. The officer's voice was measured as he explained, "Captain, we've received an overwhelming number of media requests regarding your conversation with the President. While your service is honored, we advise you to keep a low profile. The Navy prefers that such discussions remain internal." Dawson's eyes hardened. "Am I a distraction?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying the fatigue of years of fighting for respect. The officer hesitated before replying, "That's not what I mean, but in our line of work, the focus should be on the mission, not personal opinions." His words, though carefully chosen, stung with the implication that she should remain silent, a voice that many believed was long overdue. In that moment, Dawson realized that silence might allow the narrative to be controlled by those who wished to dismiss her message as nothing more than a personal grievance. Yet, speaking out further would thrust her into an unyielding spotlight. A spotlight that could redefine her career, her legacy, and even her life. That very night, as she sat alone in her modest apartment, the weight of the day pressed down on her. She scrolled through the endless barrage of tweets, emails, and opinion pieces that had been generated by her testimony. Each message was a mixture of support and vitriol, a cacophony of voices that both uplifted and tormented her. In the quiet solitude of the night, she wondered, was this the change she wanted? Could her voice, once silenced by the institutional forces of the military, now be used to spark a larger conversation about the need for true leadership and equality? After hours of reflection, Captain Dawson made a decision. She would not allow others to define her narrative. Instead of succumbing to the pressure to remain silent, she would reclaim her voice on her own terms. Rather than agreeing to the Navy's directive to keep quiet, she began drafting a statement, a clear, measured declaration of her truth. Every word was chosen with care, a testament to the struggles, the sacrifices, and the resilience required to lead in an environment that often dismissed her contributions. A statement was posted on her official Navy social media page. A brief, unadorned message that read, "Leadership is about responsibility, about making tough decisions under immense pressure, and earning trust day by day. For some of us, the journey is made even more difficult by the extra challenges of proving our worth. I do not seek to be a victim, nor do I wish to incite discord. I serve because I believe in this country and in the values that make us strong. Let us move forward together." Within minutes, the post exploded into a firestorm of support and criticism alike. The hashtag Captain Dawson Speaks soared to trending status on Twitter, and her words became the subject of fervent discussion across national media. Across the country, the debate over Captain Dawson's testimony grew to a fever pitch. On cable news, panel discussions dissected her every word. Anchors argued about whether the military culture had evolved enough to be truly inclusive, or if her experience was indicative of deeper, systemic issues that needed to be addressed. On one channel, a retired Navy admiral spoke with raw emotion. Women in the military have fought for decades to be taken seriously. When they speak their truth, they are met with resistance. Not because they are weak, but because our institutions are slow to change. In another segment, a political commentator argued, "This is exactly why we must focus on results, not feelings. If Captain Dawson can't handle the pressure, then maybe she's not cut out for leadership." Social media became a battleground of opinions. Tweets, Facebook posts, and YouTube videos emerged from every corner of the nation. Hashtags such as "Earn Your Trust," "Women in Command," and "Military Matters" flooded timelines. Veterans, active duty officers, and civilians alike weighed in, sharing personal stories, debating the merits of her words, and even calling for policy reforms. Some of these voices, emboldened by her courage, began to organize grassroots initiatives to promote more inclusive leadership training in the military. For Captain Dawson, the whirlwind of attention was both empowering and overwhelming. As her inbox filled with messages from admirers and detractors, she was forced to confront the reality that her private struggle had become a public symbol. But even amid the chaos, she remained resolute. In a rare moment of quiet during a brief respite from interviews and media calls, she confided to a close friend, "I never asked for this spotlight, but if it means we can start a conversation about how leadership truly works and how every soldier, regardless of gender, must earn respect, then I'll bear this cross." Her words resonated deeply with many, and soon a wave of support from within the military community began to form. Young officers who had long felt marginalized, veterans who had been silenced by outdated norms, and even some of the very critics who had dismissed her were now rethinking what true leadership meant. As the debate raged in the public sphere, life inside the Navy was not without its own internal battles. In the halls of Norfolk Naval Station, whispers about Captain Dawson's statements and the controversy that followed became common. Some senior officers privately acknowledged that her words had struck a nerve that had long been ignored. For many, her candid account of the pressures faced by women in command was a long overdue admission of a truth that was often swept under the rug. In small meeting rooms and during quiet moments in the mess hall, conversations unfolded. Officers debated the need for cultural reform within the military, a conversation that had been stifled for too long by tradition and fear of change. One officer confided, "I've seen talented women struggle their entire careers to prove themselves, only to be dismissed as too emotional or too soft. Captain Dawson is brave enough to say it out loud, and that's something we can't ignore." At the same time, those who were tasked with maintaining the image of the Navy faced a dilemma. The Public Affairs Office received countless calls and emails from concerned citizens, veterans, and even politicians, demanding clarity on the matter. A leaked internal memo, intended for senior leadership only, suggested that some high-ranking officials feared the growing backlash and considered downplaying the controversy. Yet, as more evidence surfaced that Captain Dawson's words had ignited a genuine movement, even the most hardened voices within the establishment could no longer remain silent. The momentum built by Captain Dawson's testimony eventually reached the halls of Congress. Lawmakers, inspired by the fervor of public sentiment, began to hold hearings on the subject of military culture and leadership. In one such hearing, a panel of veterans and experts debated whether the military had evolved enough to provide equal opportunities for all its leaders. One senator, with decades of service behind him, stated, "We must recognize that leadership isn't defined solely by tradition or rank. It's defined by the courage to speak truth, even when it's uncomfortable. These hearings, televised and widely watched, sparked further reflection among the American people. Editorials in major newspapers echoed the call for reform, emphasizing that the sacrifices of service members, especially those who had faced additional challenges due to their gender or background, deserved recognition and support. Public opinion polls soon reflected a shift. A majority of Americans now believed that the military needed to take stronger steps toward inclusivity, and that leaders like Captain Dawson should be celebrated, not silenced. The debate wasn't limited to politics either. It seeped into everyday conversations, at dinner tables, in classrooms, and even on sports talk shows. On an influential military blog published an op-ed titled, "Earning Trust, the True Mark of Leadership," in which a retired Navy admiral wrote, "For too long, the very qualities that make a leader great have been overlooked. It's time we acknowledged that true leadership requires the strength to stand alone, to face the world's judgment, and to keep moving forward regardless of the obstacles." The post quickly went viral, becoming a rallying cry for those who believed that the heart of military leadership was not found in perfection, but in perseverance and authenticity. For Captain Dawson, the relentless public debate was a double-edged sword. While her words had sparked necessary conversations, they had also exposed her to the harsh scrutiny of an unforgiving public. Threats and online abuse trickled in from anonymous sources, and some media personalities twisted her statements into caricatures. Yet, through it all, she remained steadfast. Late one evening, as she sat in her modest office on a ship, she reread the statement she had posted. The simple, unvarnished message about the burden of leadership and the need to earn trust reminded her of why she had spoken out in the first place. It wasn't about seeking fame or inciting controversy. It was about paving the way for a future where every officer, regardless of gender, could serve with dignity and respect. One day, while on duty, a young lieutenant approached her. "Captain Dawson," he said shyly, "I just wanted to tell you, I've never heard anyone speak so honestly about what it means to lead. I feel like I understand my own struggles a little better now thanks to you." Her eyes softened as she replied, "Thank you. Remember, leadership is a journey, and we all have our own crosses to bear. It's how we carry them that defines us." That quiet exchange, witnessed by a few nearby sailors, was a reminder that her words had truly resonated. In that moment, she realized that by owning her story, she was inspiring a new generation, a generation that would not shy away from the challenges of leadership, but would confront them with courage and honesty. In the aftermath of the public debate, changes began to take shape, not only within the Navy, but across the broader landscape of military leadership and policy. In response to the growing calls for reform, a coalition of veterans, active duty officers, and lawmakers joined forces to launch the National Empathy Initiative. This groundbreaking program aimed to foster a culture of understanding and accountability within the armed forces, ensuring that every service member, especially those from underrepresented groups, had the support and respect they deserved. The initiative included mentorship programs that paired young officers with seasoned veterans, leadership workshops emphasizing emotional intelligence and resilience, and forums for open dialogue on the challenges of modern military life. Captain Dawson was invited to serve on the advisory board, her experience and candid perspective proving invaluable as the program took shape. In a televised address, a prominent senator remarked, "The National Empathy Initiative is not just about changing policies, it's about transforming the way we view leadership in our military. It's about ensuring that every person who serves is valued not only for their skill, but for the character and conviction they bring to the table." The address struck a chord across the nation, reinforcing the idea that progress could only be achieved when the wisdom of the past was integrated with the innovations of the future. Meanwhile, public opinion continued to evolve. Social media campaigns under hashtags like Earn Your Trust and Lead with Empathy began trending, and countless veterans shared their own stories of overcoming adversity in environments where their capabilities were questioned solely because they were different. The voices of many, long silenced by institutional biases, finally found a platform, and their words echoed the message that Captain Dawson had so boldly delivered. Elon Musk himself continued to reflect on the events at Norfolk and aboard the USS George H.W. Bush. In interviews with major news outlets, he acknowledged that while his companies often pushed the boundaries of technological innovation, it was the human element, the intuition, the passion, the lived experience that provided the spark for true progress. "We can program an AI to do amazing things," he once said, "but without the heart, without the human touch, we're missing something essential." Today reminded me that even a veteran from the Apollo era can teach us that lesson. The story of Captain Dawson and the debate that followed ultimately forged a bridge between two worlds. That of the old guard, steeped in tradition and hard-won experience, and the new generation, eager to push the frontiers of technology, but sometimes lacking the wisdom that only time can bring. At a major aerospace conference a year later, a panel discussion titled "The Future of Leadership in the Military" featured both young tech innovators and veteran leaders. During the session, a young engineer, still a staunch advocate of AI, remarked, "Automation will eventually eliminate the need for human judgment. Data never lies." An older officer, with decades of service etched into his face, countered, "Data can inform us, but it cannot replace the instinct born of experience. It's the lessons learned in the field that teach us how to respond when the unexpected happens." The conversation, captured on video and shared widely online, encapsulated the central theme of the national debate: a recognition that progress is most meaningful when it respects the past. Viewers from across the country, from military bases to college dorms, engaged with the discussion. Some commented that the future of leadership would be a hybrid, a delicate blend of cutting-edge technology and timeless human wisdom. Captain Dawson, now a respected figure both within the Navy and in public discourse, continued to travel, speaking at leadership seminars, participating in forums on gender equality in the military, and mentoring young officers. Her personal journey, fraught with the challenges of overcoming institutional bias, became a beacon of hope. "Every time you doubt your worth," she would say during her speeches, "remember that leadership is not given, it's earned, day by day, in the face of adversity." Her message resonated deeply with many, sparking similar initiatives in other branches of the armed forces, and even influencing corporate leadership programs. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. A growing chorus of voices called for a system that valued merit, accountability, and above all, the human spirit. Years later, as Captain Dawson looked back on the whirlwind of events that had upended her life, she understood that the ripples of that day at Norfolk were still being felt. The controversy, the debates, and the calls for reform had all contributed to a shift in the military culture, a shift that recognized that every individual, regardless of gender or background, deserved to be heard and respected. In a quiet moment aboard her ship, she sat with a cup of coffee and reflected on the journey. The harsh criticisms, the media frenzy, the private threats, all had been part of a process that forced the nation to confront uncomfortable truths. "I never asked for this spotlight," she confided to a trusted friend. "But if my words can help change how we view leadership, then every hardship has been worth it." In living rooms and boardrooms across America, discussions continued to echo her message: that leadership is built on the ability to persevere, to earn trust through countless small acts of bravery, and to stand firm in the face of relentless criticism. Social media continued to buzz with hashtags, and newspapers printed op-eds that spoke of a new era, one where the lessons of the past were not discarded but embraced as vital components of a better future. For Elon Musk, the experiment had proven a profound lesson. In private reflections and public statements alike, he admitted that even the most advanced technology must be complemented by human insight. Our future, he stated in an interview, depends on a fusion of the old and the new. We cannot ignore the wisdom of those who paved the way for us. Their experiences, like Captain Dawson's, remind us that progress is not just about data and algorithms, but about the heart behind every decision. And so, as the nation continued to evolve, and as SpaceX prepared for new missions that would push the boundaries of human achievement, the legacy of that fateful meeting endured. In every successful launch, in every instance of a crisis averted by a human decision, there was an echo of Captain Dawson's words. A reminder that leadership, in its truest form, is about responsibility, perseverance, and above all, the unwavering belief that every person deserves to be seen. In our modern world where technology and automation are celebrated as the pinnacle of progress, the story of Captain Dawson and the private conversation that sparked a national debate stands as a powerful reminder that the human element can never be replaced. It challenges us to look beyond the shiny exterior of modernity and to recognize that true leadership is rooted in empathy, courage, and the ability to overcome adversity. What if every organization, every government, and every institution took a moment to listen to voices like Captain Dawson's? What if we judged leaders not solely on their technological prowess or their polished public image, but on their ability to inspire trust, to show compassion, and to make difficult decisions when the stakes are highest? These are questions that this story leaves us with, a call to reflect on the values that define us as a society. As you consider this narrative, ask yourself, do you believe that experience and human intuition still have a place in today's fast-paced, AI-driven world? How can we, as a society, ensure that our leaders are not just technically proficient, but also deeply humane? And most importantly, what can each of us do to show empathy and kindness in our daily lives, regardless of our status or wealth? I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know which state or country you're joining us from, and if this story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe for more narratives that challenge, inspire, and remind us of the enduring power of the human spirit.